Hello and welcome to this edition of World Watch with Open Doors, in which we focus on the People's Republic of China, where Christians have experienced some of the worst persecution on record. But incredibly, the rate at which the Christian church has been growing has also broken all records, especially in the last 2 decades. Yet, as Paul Esterbrook reports, the explosion of the church produces major challenges, to which those of us in the free world surely must respond.
It looks like just another of the great capitalist cities of the world, doesn't it? But to think so is to be deluded. Here in Shanghai, you could be forgiven for believing you were in the heart of a busy Western metropolis. The hallmarks are everywhere, from the fast food outlets to the Western fashions displayed on the main streets of the city. In bars and clubs, the playlist is Western, with songs like Lady Be Good. The openness to communication might surprise you. In my hotel room, CNN is readily available on Channel 1, though you will search in vain for the Gideon Bible. Many of the people in the streets will greet you in English and welcome you to their city. It seems that China is just like the rest of the free world. In reality, China is the most powerful communist nation in the world today, and widely predicted to become the superpower of the 21st century. It's a regime that officially brands religion as superstition and only for the weak. It could have been so very different. Along this waterfront, missionaries used to arrive with the message of Jesus Christ. From here, they traveled inland throughout the country. One of the best known among them was Hudson Taylor, who walked these very streets, dreaming of the day when the gospel would be shared with everyone throughout the country of China. The man we now know as Chairman Mao had different ideas. Had it not been for one of the most dramatic revolutions in the world, Chinese people today might be living in a democracy. What happened in this Shanghai building in July 1921 changed the whole course of China's history. It's here that 12 conspirators met in what was the first meeting of the Chinese Communist Party. One of the 12, interesting number, isn't it? One of the 12 was a man named Mao Zedong, still revered in China today. Mao was the founding father of modern Chinese communism. His aim was total control. To achieve that, he had to impose himself on the hearts and minds of China's vast millions. His powerful speeches were collected in the famous Little Red Book, which the entire population had to study, recite, and apply.
We must be ruthless to our enemies, overpower and annihilate them. Revolution is not a dinner party. Power comes from the barrel of the gun. War is the highest form of struggle or resolving contradictions.
Mao's drive for total control climaxed in the Cultural Revolution that began in 1966 and lasted for 10 long years until his death. Students were incited to despise or torture their teachers. Works of art and every kind of literature were destroyed. Red Guards ransacked the homes of the educated or religious. Young people were forced to inform on their parents. Self-criticism sessions intensified. Many of them ended with suicide. Doctors and surgeons were forced to clean hospital toilets and floors.
I received medical training in the Peking Union Medical College, so they think I must be treated even more severely. I said, you have been training clean the streets for me to use. Now it's my turn to clean the streets for you to use.
Part of the heritage to be swept away was, of course, the Christian church.
I was one of the leaders in the Youth Red Guards. My family were Christians, and so I hated them and turned against them. I made sure they were blacklisted and their homes were raided. I personally handed over my parents' Bible and hymn books to be burned in public.
In Shanghai alone, nearly 300 churches were closed in just 1 month. But Mao's strategy did not work. Today in this very city, there are estimated to be at least 20,000 unregistered house churches. Can you see what an obstacle, what an impediment the Christian church was to the revolutionary plan? But can you also see how living faith was so vital to those subjected to political bondage? A faith they would not relinquish, whatever the cost. The stage was set for dramatic conflict. This pastor spent 22 years in prison because, like Daniel's friends, he would not bow his knee to anyone but the living God. Professor Chen taught music at the university. He also composed many Chinese hymns and was an accomplished pianist. Early in the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards ransacked his home, burned his precious manuscripts and library in a huge fire. Then came the ultimatum: deny your faith in Christ or you will never play the piano again. Professor Chen replied, I love Jesus. I would never deny him. The Red Guards took his hands, held them in the fire until his fingers burned off. Today, despite a modernization program and openness to the West, the legacy of Mao Zedong lives on. This is the very symbol of communist control in China. Tiananmen Square is the biggest plaza in the world. It was here Mao first raised the flag of the new communist state on October 1st, 1949. 40 years later, it was still the symbol of communist control when it became the center of world attention during the crushing of the student protests in 1989. Today, China is still the land of control. Even as we recorded this program, official eyes were watching our every move through these long lens cameras. In China today, the state is God. Its angels are materialism and economics, and atheism is king. From the shadows, this is still the listening, watching state. Religion, they still say, is for the weak, and tens of millions of Christians continue to operate underground. For them, the threat of persecution is still very real. There is, of course, an alternative. In China, official legal registered churches exist, but they are controlled by the communist government. For more than 50 million Christians who form China's unregistered house churches, this is unacceptable.
The government wanted us to registration. We refuse to do it. If we register, then we can preach openly. We are so protected by the government. So our meeting is lawful.
We meet secretly, mostly in homes, but sometimes even in a yard. The number of people who gather together varies from 5 to 2,000.
Rarely can eyes and ears from the free world come so close to the real heart of the church in China.
Communism has created a spiritual hunger in China. People are so open to receive Jesus. It is not uncommon to see preachers fainting from exhaustion while preaching. For them, 24 hours a day is not enough.
From large cities to small villages, Christians of all ages are actively and effectively sharing their faith. But membership of the unregistered house church in China has its price. Sister Wang is the leader of a house church in northern China. When she became a Christian, her husband divorced her, and then the police raided her house.
They confiscated all our Bibles and spiritual books. They had the evidence, but now they wanted information. When I refused, they became more and more violent and kicked me indiscriminately.
At that time, the words of John 11:25 were very precious to her.
I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies.
Sister Weng's experience is shared by hundreds of Christians throughout the country. Brother Shu has been on the wanted list for the past 4 years. Just recently, the police broke into his home at midnight, handcuffed him, took him into custody.
They wanted me to disclose information regarding meeting points, names of providers of Bibles and books.
So you again, how many times have we warned you? You still come to our province with your stupid literature. Who supplied? Who are your contacts?
Oh Lord, help me. Help me to forgive him. He's only doing his job.
Tell me, who?
The books were given to me. I don't know his name.
But we know you. You are Ma Yuanping. You are disturbing the peace. You lie to the people. Now tell me, who are your contacts?
Lord, give me the strength to keep silence. Save me from my greatest fear, that I will break and tell.
Well, you decided to keep silence? Perhaps we shall re-educate you, huh?
Lord, I want to thank you for choosing me to suffer for you.
I see that you have chosen the hard way. Let me see if we can change your mind.
Every day they interrogated him, beat him with a leather belt, and even pulled out his hair.
And I was transferred to prison. This gave me the chance to share the gospel with other prisoners, but I was so emotionally and physically drained that I could only lead 3 people to the Lord over the first 2 weeks.
Prison experience is a combination of physical and psychological torture. Former prisoners demonstrated how for hours they're forced to stand in totally unnatural positions. For days they're prevented from going to the toilet. The pain is excruciating. This man told me, God called me to be a pastor. I was too afraid. And then I realized there are thieves in prison who risk their lives for money. Will I not risk mine for God?
The only reason we can survive such ordeals is because of God's grace and the fact that Christians were